is Young Conservatives Week here on Mornings with Maria. Former NBA star Enes Kanter Freedom joined me yesterday, and we spoke about White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre's response to whether transgender athletes in female sports is a women's rights issue. Watch this. Enes, what about there? You've lived it. Is it complicated?
It is not complicated at all. I mean, men do not belong in women's spaces, restrooms, locker rooms, and sports. I remember when we had this conversation in our locker room, everyone agreed with me. But I was like, guys, then why don't you just go out there and say something? And they're like, well, you know, we don't want to get canceled.
Joining me right now is the former University of Kentucky swimmer, the director of the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. Riley Gaines is with us this morning. Riley, congratulations to you. Thanks very much for being here this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And, of course, your story shined a light on this very issue. Why is it so hard for female athletes to have their voices heard on this, not wanting a biological male to have a competition and on the same level as a female?
It's hard to have our voices heard because not enough people are saying it. And this is exactly right. People are terrified. And really, make no mistake, it's not just the female athletes who are scared. It's the parents who are unwilling to defend their daughters because they're so scared. You know, they work in corporate America. They don't want to lose their job. It's the coaches who are terrified of a lawsuit or any kind of repercussion from the university. But I can speak to my experience as an athlete. What we went through to keep us quiet, it's emotional blackmail. You know, they told us this label would follow us for the rest of our lives. You would never get a job if you speak out. You will never get into grad school. They told us that we should seek counseling if we felt uncomfortable seeing male genitalia in the locker room.
Well,
mandatory LGBTQ education meetings. I mean, the list goes on. They told us that we would be equivalent to a murderer if we spoke out and any harm were to come towards Thomas's way, indicating if he were to harm himself, we would be solely responsible. Therefore, we would be murderers if we advocated for privacy or equal opportunities in our sports.
That's incredible. I mean, and you see the media taking up the exact tone that this administration and the Democrats are pushing. Riley, British Vogue named trans cyclist Emily Bridges as one of its 25 powerhouse women. Bridges is the only athlete mentioned on the list. Your reaction to this?
Are we surprised? I mean, time and time again, we've seen this. We've seen Hershey do this for Women's History Month. They honored, I believe his name was Faye, as this one of, I think, 8 women. We've seen ESPN do this, and they honored Leah Thomas during Women's History Month as this brave, inspiring female athlete who has broken these barriers and has become a trailblazer for women. No, let me tell you something. None of us on that pool deck wanted Thomas there. I saw the tears. I saw the tears from the 9th and 17th place finishers who missed out on being named an All-American by 1 place. And I felt the extreme discomfort in the locker room from all of us when a 6'4" man walks in, starts undressing from his women's swimsuit and is fully intact with male genitalia. We did not want him there, yet ESPN is choosing to throw what they know is right. They know this is wrong. What they know is right out of the window to honor this person. Same thing with Bud Light. Same thing with Tampax, Ulta. I mean, so many brands are going this direction, and you would think they would learn from the mistakes and the repercussions that Bud Light and Target have faced, but they haven't learned. They're continuing. I think a big piece of this is ESG and, of course, money.
But, yeah, why? That was my next question, Riley. Why? Why would they do this instead of celebrating women's rights, instead of celebrating women who have actually worked and are trailblazers? You are a trailblazer. Why not celebrate you? Why not rally around you to say, no, she's not going to compete with a biological male? No, we're not going to have a biological male in the dressing room. Why? What are they missing?
Well, I can tell you why I think. And being a Christian myself, I see this entirely as spiritual warfare. The Bible tells us that we will live in a time where our no's are yeses and our yeses are no. And I'm certain that we're living in that time now. But I'll tell you, I'm excited because we know who wins. But these companies, they're following the money. They don't follow red. They don't follow blue. They follow green. Same thing with the NCAA. Same thing with prisons and domestic violence shelters. They're scared of losing federal funding. They know if they don't adhere, they won't get that money. So they're willing to do whatever to make sure they can maintain their funding.
And it's the same thing with investing in communist China. You know, I mean, they complain about investing in fossil fuels. No, we don't want to do that. But they're perfectly fine investing in the very companies that may very well turn their guns against America with the Chinese Communist Party. Riley, you recently launched the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. You're trying to help fight for women's spaces to remain just for women. Tell us about the Institute and how it's resonating.
Absolutely. So when I started speaking out, I began to get an influx of private messages, people telling me, you know, thank you for doing what you're doing, keep going. And at first I was, you know, pretty honored by this, but then as it continued, I began to feel frustrated because the arrows, they began to come. And I was getting a lot of those. And I'm like, you know, why aren't people sharing these arrows with me? And I realized people are scared. They're scared to be leaders for those reasons that we mentioned. And so I created the Riley Gaines Center. What this is, it's a training program to help empower and inspire and equip leaders, whether that's, you know, school board leaders, community leaders, national leaders, campus leaders, whatever that looks like, equip them with the correct resources and communication tools to be effective in being a leader. We're also going to be funding to put conservative speakers back on college campuses, which I think is so important, especially just graduating from college and seeing how the freedom of speech is under threat. Continuing to help girls, female athletes, women really break their stories as it pertains to this so people don't continue to believe the narrative that this is a non-issue and it's not happening, because that couldn't be further from the truth.
That's absolutely right. And the idea that a university is supposed to be full of lots of diverse ideas, the idea that a conservative voice gets censored is complete insanity, Kaylee. I mean, yeah, I thought university was supposed to be an educated place where we could hear lots of different opinions.
Yeah, and yet that's where speech is suppressed the most nowadays. And Riley, I think you're so right that it is so important for more people to be speaking out about this. And we saw this week a coach come forward, and that's really encouraging to see. But what else? Do you also think that maybe it's the time for female athletes to boycott events in which they're being forced to compete against men? Or do you think that they should try and ride out this wave and wait for more support to come?
You know what? When this first started happening, I thought women shouldn't have to compromise. Women shouldn't have to boycott. This should be handled by the policymakers, the people who put these rules in place. We need to change the rules. But I'll tell you when that shift happened for me and when I changed my mind on that is when this bill was introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives by Representative Greg Steube, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, and it fell entirely on party lines, meaning every single Democrat, all 203 of them voted in opposition of protecting women and girls in sports. And that's when I realized it's going to take us. We have to handle this. We can't wait for elected officials to do it because too many girls will be injured. Too many girls will lose out on opportunities. Too many girls will be exploited in a locker room if we do that. So I most certainly think boycott and refusing to participate, refusing to adhere is the correct means of how to handle this.
That is wonderful. And Riley, we want to all thank you for your leadership and courage. We recognize what it takes to be out there the way you have been. You'll be sticking with us for a bit this morning, so stay with us, Riley. We'll take a short break. Welcome back. Time for the Morning Buzz. Members of Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority at the University of Wyoming vowing to keep fighting to, quote, protect women's spaces. It comes after a federal judge dismissed their lawsuit against the inclusion of a transgender student in their sorority last week. One plaintiff joined Fox News on Tuesday. Watch this.
The fight continues on. We're prepared with a litany of additional legal filings, and this increased retaliation by Headquartered will not be allowed to stand. It's interesting that we can't define women in a court of law, but this really isn't about defining women anymore. Now it appears that being a woman is nothing more than a clever game of semantics, and that one can just decide that one is a woman. And along with that becomes all the entitlements.
This as the Democrats continue to claim that they care so much about women's rights. Still with us is Riley Gaines. Riley, your reaction to what's taking place at the University of Wisconsin?
I'm appalled. But again, I'm not surprised. First of all, they've had problems with this judge the entirety of this case. These girls, they wanted to remain anonymous initially when listing as plaintiffs or witnesses, and he did not grant them that. He told them, you have to put your name to this and just know it's going to follow you. He wanted to scare them. Keep in mind, he's like 88 years old or something like that. But to not be able to define the word woman, we've seen this time and time again. Again, we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who won't even do such because guess what? She claims she's not a biologist. Okay, well, I'm not a veterinarian, but I know what a dog is. That's the silliest reason to not be able to define a woman. Yeah. Yet this man, he's willing to put these girls in harm's way. And let me tell you, they are in harm's way. I'm very close with several of these girls on this case. I just was with one in Omaha this past week. And what they're going through, what this man, Artemis, what he does to them, what he says to them, again, I won't list too much because of the litigation process. I wish I could, but you would be disturbed.
That's just incredible. I mean, it's all so stunning. And by the way, obviously, I meant University of Wyoming. I've got Mike Gallagher on the mind. He's coming up from Wisconsin. What do you think? You were at Kappa Kappa.
I was. Fun fact about me, I was a Kappa Kappa Gamma in college. And so this case is personal for me in a way. I imagine what my experience would have been like if I was forced to share a house and to share a bathroom with a man who was ogling after women who were undressed in very intimate situations. And it's truly disgusting. That's what it is. But I want to talk about the judge's reasoning on this case for dismissing it. Is he essentially said, because the crux of the case had to do with Kappa's bylaws, which state that members have to be a woman. And essentially what this judge said is that it is up to Kappa to determine what a woman is, and that he didn't want to weigh in on the definition of a woman. Think about what that does to not only our language, but to the legal foundation of this country. Yeah. If you can't define what a woman is, what biological sex is, then what is the point of all of the sex-based laws that protect women's rights? That is the point of this, is by making these terms subjective, they are laying the foundation for eliminating sex-based spaces and teams entirely. That is the entire point.
Unbelievable. Riley.
You're absolutely right, which is why it's crucial that states and as well at the federal level, they pass legislation that defines the word woman. I would never in a million years would have imagined that we need this, but just this past, actually just last night, Governor Pillen of Nebraska signed into an executive order on the Women's Bill of Rights. And what this is, again, it's a law that defines sex-based terms such as man, woman, male, female, mother, father, girl, boy. I met with Governor Pillen on August 27th about what this is, asking him to sign an executive order, and he did it on August 30th. That is leadership.
Yeah.
Now, 4 states have done such, with Governor Stitt signing an executive order a few weeks ago, Kansas and Tennessee. So really great news.
I mean, Riley, why can't they just have another category, transgender category? Men, women, transgender. Is that a bad thing to say? So that it's all the same playing field.
It's because they don't actually want equality. They want to take away our rights. They don't want to be able to compete fairly and safely with the same chances of success that we would have. They want to take away our chances of success. And notice this isn't happening, women entering into men's sororities, women entering into men's sports or into men's prisons.
That's right.
This is only going one way, and it's only jeopardizing women.
That's right. Great point. Do you think young people are seeing this as an issue to move to the Conservative Party? We're doing young conservatives all week this week.
Certainly. If you just saw the news or how politicians voted, you would think this is a divisive issue, but this is a unifying issue, and we're seeing that.
Yeah. Riley, great to see you. Please come back soon. We're all big fans. Thank you so much. Riley Gaines joining us this morning. Congrats to you, Riley.